After TV Polity, we discuss issues that are very germane to the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian state generally. On many occasions, we feature politicians, but today we'll be featuring economists and some of the brightest and the best. Today, we'll be talking the economy. We'll be talking about the situation in our polity as regards how do we grow the nation's economy, how do we grow in terms of providing good welfare for the people and ensuring that Nigerians have the good life. And that is what many people believe is missing today. Now, you hear some very highfalutin figures from government about achievements. Some of them are mouth-watering when they tell you about how our foreign reserve as of today and what it used to be in the past, and then the falling prices of items in the market, the number of roads that are being constructed, the infrastructural development, and the whole gamut of government policies that are yielding fruits. But the strident cry of the people continues. Ebin pami everywhere. People continue to say they are hungry, whereas government figures does not show or represent that. Where is the disconnect? Are government figures fake, or they are just popped up, or are people being are they being political? What is the relationship between government achievements in the economic sector and what the people are feeling? That's what we shall be discussing on the polity this afternoon. And I have, like I said, two of the brightest and the best in economic development and management in this country. On my far right is our renowned Professor Ken Ife. Professor Ken Ife is a development economist, like we all know, and while I was surfing the net, I also got something about him that is the chief economic strategist in ECOWAS Commission, and like I said, a development economist. Prof, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and when they both came to the studio today, the other one said, you brought my big brother here, and the other one said, this my brother is enough to handle the topic. I'm talking about Dr. Emeka Okongwu. Dr. Emeka Okongwu is an international business and project development consultant. I welcome you to the program.
Thank you so much, Shogun. Good to see you again.
I'm happy to have the two of you in the studio this afternoon. And like I said, I'm the unlearned man in the studio today. So I want to learn, because that is what we have all been talking about in the newsroom. These are very good figures from government. We've never had some of these figures before in recent times. But why are we still feeling what we are feeling? Prof?
Well, you could be looking at different sides of a coin. There are sides where you look at the economy and all the parameters that work the economy, and then there's the other side where you say, but how about the people who are on the receiving end? One thing that I have to say by opening is that we try to run a market economy, and investment is the beginning. You need to have investment because we're a developing economy. And when they call you developing economy or underdeveloped economy, it means that you are somewhere down there. You have to work all your human resource, work all your material and physical resource. You have to develop all of them to enable you come to the frontiers of development compared to the West. And you understand? That's what the meaning. Meaning means you have problem. And then the beginning is you have to have investment. It is the investment that creates economic activity, or what you call creates wealth. And it is that wealth that creates employment. It is the employment that gives rise to disposable income. And it will be the disposable income that you fight poverty. You pay fees, you pay school fees, you pay health services, and then you come back again. So that is the cycle. Anybody telling you anything that doesn't involve investment, then they are involved in squandermania of some sort. And then you meet the second point is, when you say investment, where is it coming from? In a free market economy that we all envisage, we tend to look at private sector to bring much of that. Now, the private sector is shy because they want to make sure that the environment in which they are going to invest is conducive and that is empowering and that they will make some profit. So in the absence of attracting them, creating all the conditions, including security, to make them invest their money and have confidence in your economy, then you will revert to the public sector. Now that's where your problem begins. Public sector will look for reserve, they don't have. They look for investment, they don't have. They now go borrowing. And who goes are borrowing, goes are sorrowing.
Wow.
And then if they can't borrow enough or at the speed at which they want it, they're going to start printing money. And that is even the worst part of it. So all of these things that the government tries to do cause the thing you are telling me. They cause all the problem that you have. People can't afford to buy this food. They can't afford that and that. It's all because of printing money, borrowing anyhow, not having reserves to call on. That's where that one begins. So let me give a message.
Doctor, you want to add one or two to that?
Yes, I think the beginning point will be, you called people. The people are suffering. So who are the people? Are they citizens or are they numbers? That's the beginning. For anything you want to plan, any plan that is going to be both futuristic and realistic, it has to be based on real people, on real statistics. And this is why the beginning point in any planned, programmed development is based on who are you planning for? Where are they? Okay, I mean, you want to now do water reticulation program for Abuja. How many people live in Abuja? What volume of water do you need? Where are you going to be having your aggregation point? Now that will be the beginning. We're talking about now, government now talking about numbers. Again, remember that each time people talk about government, when it comes to Nigeria, we don't have a central government, as it were, operating for every other person. Okay, you have a central government that has federal government programs. You now have state governments that also now have their own programs. So that first and major disconnect is where is that meeting point? You're talking about people suffering, for instance, in Ogun State. Now, how many people live in Ogun State? What are the programs that the federal government and Ogun State are working together in synergy? I take agriculture for an example. Show me one agriculture policy you know about in this country that the planning started from the local government, then got the state government, then got the federal government to be able to participate. So if you don't understand these numbers, then you cannot just oppose it to what Prof is talking about investment. And then when he says to you that private investors are shy, there are many numerous reasons why that shyness might come. When you talk about a conducive environment, I'll give you a typical example, and I'll be resting on this. The mining sector for now. Many cases where the federal government has given people leases, they have taken the equipment, mobilized to site, and then the state government seizes those equipments, declaring them illegal miners, sometimes even arresting them.
You disconnect. Okay,
now, so who do you hold responsible for the loss of that investment? I remember that Prof says that money is the biggest coward in any room. Okay, if you were a bank manager, a managing director today, Shegun, and they said that bank was distressed, and if your phone is off for more than 4 hours, your wife will go and withdraw her money, before waiting for your confirmation. Ditto for all your very close friends. And even when you now put all those assurances, it won't just be, by mouth. You need to also show it. So The major challenge I think Nigeria has is that we have not been able to build a national development program that everybody participated and every sector was captured and every need was identified for you to now be able to now build this holistic, funding program. Okay. That's the investment-driven program that Prof was talking about.
Okay. Prof, I'm sure you two have seen some of the latest figures from the Federal Bureau of Statistics, for instance. But there are others from other development agencies, even World Bank, about our economy. They are very good figures from the layman's point of view. Looking at the Nigerian, do you believe in those figures? Because what people, even critics of the administration, say is that these are only paper drawn, these are handwritten, some of these may not be true. Do you believe in those figures?
The figures are correct, but you see, if a figure tells you that there's growth in the economy, and you can see the figure, that figure does not, that growth you see of GDP of 3.8 does not put food on your table.
Yes.
It doesn't put food on the table because it hasn't explained why more people have gone into poverty. More people cannot get food to eat. You are seeing growth, but when you look at agriculture and the growth of agriculture is 0.07%, it's an alarm because population is growing at 2.8 to 3%, urbanization is growing at 4.6%. How come the food that we require to eat to feed that population is growing at 0.07? You can call it zero. So immediately an alarm bell rings. And then even more so when 70% of your population are under the age of 35. So it's a bigger alarm, So those figures, yes, they may be correct, but they don't explain the diversification of the economy. They don't explain inclusivity of the economy. It doesn't explain that you have 42 million MSMEs that account for 60% of the GDP, 90% of the employment, and yet they are struggling to make. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Let me ask you this. Okay. Give us an overview of the Nigerian economy today. You've mentioned agriculture, for instance, that the growth is almost at 0%. Give us an overview for us to be able to appreciate where we are today and where we are suffering, in quotes now, what we are suffering today. Where are we in terms of our economy today? Can we be different from where we are today, looking at it?
Of course. On 29th of May 2023, when the new administration came in, Nigeria was like in a coma, in an intensive unit with complications. Not many people could tell what actually was wrong, but we do know that there are big ones. That there was a subsidy regime that was taking 500 billion every month. And there was so much crisis at the level of debt. We didn't even know how deep that debt was. So that was, and it was also, that intensive unit was on the cliff, about to drop. But we now know that 2.5 years later, the country has actually come off that cliff and is in a recovery position. Now that's how I can describe what has happened and what it is now.
Yes.
But to bring it to a recovery position means that major changes have to take place. Major reforms have to take place. When you have reforms of the nature that we are experiencing, there will be pain. And there's a lot of it. The question is, how long will people endure that pain? And who is left behind? And what effort are we making to square up or to bring back the people on the slow lane? So when Tinubu stopped the subsidy, it was a great move. He had the courage. Over 10 years, not everybody was scared. Even from Jonathan, they tried and then they came out on the street, but he had the courage to say enough. And it was the right decision. But what happened was that he had so many balls in the air at the same time. Because while he had that subsidy, he also want equalization of the policy rates. And that is another one. And so all of those were interactive. The effect, they are all both necessary, but the effect was interactive. And you know what happens in frequency? If people are on the same frequency coming together, you have an amplitude. But if they cancel out, then so it's a different one. So what happened was that because of the sudden removal of that subsidy, then the price of fuel went up. And that means general prices also went up because cost of transportation went up, energy costs went up, input costs went up, everything went up. That became inflationary. But you're also talking about this when you also have 33 trillion naira that has been printed, which is the middle name of that is inflation. We're already sitting on 33 trillion inflation already. So they compounded. And so people were beginning to feel the heat. And it hasn't been easy. But that notwithstanding, the money that was being saved from that subsidy, only half of it was available to the president.
Wow.
He could have done more. So he now gave the bulk of the money to governors to settle them. And you see, governors will never complain. Unlike when Buhari came in, all of them were up in arms. He had to borrow 600 billion from central bank to keep them quiet. Tinubu sorted them out. But then he now had to put some to subsidy, to food and empowerment. And then also he had a strategic program on CNG and all of that. The Marshall Plan, they had no money. Half of that money was tracked by NNPC in their inefficient operation. World Bank said it. So the first problem with our country is NNPC. That's the monopoly. From 1969, we were suffering one form of problem with NNPC to another one, even with the PIA, it continued. So if Tinubu had that remaining 50%, he would have achieved more. He would have gotten a lot of people more out of poverty. He never had it. So let's call that spade a spade. Now, we're also beginning to see other things that happen. For example, the entry of private sector into the midstream, where Dangote put $20 billion. And then you begin to see even further investment of 1.74 trillion. You can begin to see the effect it's having on the transportation system, on the stability of the price thing, and inflation is having on inflation. So they are all coming in gradually. But we still have to fight the monster of people who are in their comfort zone that are rearing their head and want to. So let me not go too far into this because we have a joint discussion.
Yes. With all this, okay, maybe I should equally give you opportunity to continue from where he stopped. He mentioned the issue of Tinubu not having all the money, because that is what many people are saying. And if you stop subsidy, where is the money? Where is the money that is being saved on subsidy? He's told us now that 50% have been, so to say, invested well by giving the governors to shut their mouth. We are coming to the governors what they have been doing with the money. But maybe you want to continue from where he stopped as to areas where help is still needed, where government is not having money to put his
there's something they call a PPA, a policy, the first P. Okay, your programs, the second P, and then the actions that support the programs and the policies, making it a PPA. No matter how much money you give, if you don't have programs that are backed by clear actions,
yes,
okay, and regimes, okay, that are either finance-based or project-based, you're going to be having that money frittered away.
That goes to the governors.
Okay, it doesn't matter who it goes to.
Yes.
Okay. So what is first and foremost is that money is fine. Okay, but money becomes useful when it is put to good use. This is very, very critical. So if you have more money, you have 80% or 50%, and you give it to the state governments. Now, the first thing we should have asked is, what programs do you have to apply these monies to? Two things can happen to that money. It can be kept in a vault, it can be kept in a bank account, and it can just be kept and then you start sharing. All right? Now, if, for instance, we had a joint national project that now federal government says we want to do agriculture.
Yes.
Out of these 500,000 hectares of land that the president had promised he wanted to, support. Out of the 75 nano, I think it's 775,000 nano industries, and then 75, big industries. Now 75 will give an approximate number of 2 to each state. And the plan was to say we have $1 trillion in savings. Okay, each state government show us 2 projects, all right, that you have comparative advantages to do. One must be in the area where it will promote food sufficiency and food security. Then the other could be in the way it will now begin to now unlock your industrial prowess. Now what will happen is that you now have a plan that ties to everybody. So by the end of this expenditure, the 36 states plus Abuja would have had a minimum of 1 mega industry, okay, being supported by maybe 75,000 nano industries, all in one project, line. Now, but when you say to Governor A and Governor B, and considering again, Sheikman, that a lot of these states have lost the use of their contiguities. Okay, and where we come from in Eastern region, where I and Prof comes from, you can walk from one state into the other state, just like where you come from too. I mean, there are no boundaries. The boundaries are actually special. Okay, there's no place you get to. They say this is where Ogun State has ended, so stop. And then you will now start traveling for 2 kilometers or 10 kilometers or even 20. They are just contiguous. So what it means is that if you look at the days of when our agricultural policy worked, and I keep telling people, when we had food sufficiency, when agriculture was king, when it was leading the charge, we didn't have any federal ministry of agriculture. Okay, it was done by the regions. And if you go and look at any regional program today, the biggest and tallest building in the whole of the Southwest, produced through real sector efforts, is the NET building. There is no other government infrastructure project that has gone higher than that. When you come to the north, is the 10-story building in Kaduna. When you come to the east, is the HCB building in Enugu. Now, these were built with proceeds from either cocoa or groundnut or palm oil. Now, they were not grown in people's farms. They were not grown, using local government. If you traversed the oil belt, okay, in Eastern region, you could have gone round just by following it. You could have moved from Enugu and ended up in Itigidi. So, for me, the planning is very critical. And then when we're talking about the private sector, also remember that in this time, we didn't have foreign investors. The marketing boards, were run by Nigerians. The trading boards were run by Nigerians. But all you had were people who now had contracts, okay, that came with their ships to be able to take away, these products because of the policy of subcontracting and what you call valorization in economics. Are you following me? So yes, Puff is right to say 50% in the hands of federal government would have been okay. But it would have been unconstitutional. All right? It would have been unconstitutional. Then you have now given autonomy to the local government, and I'm yet to see any local government that has received its allocation. And then please consider that everybody, every and each one of us lives in a local government. The president is living in Amak.
Yes.
All of us belong to a local government. So that is where the poorest of the poor is. That's also where the richest are. Then what are these interlinked infrastructure that you're bringing, to be able to bond them together? And who are these private sector? Today, the Chinese people, any Chinese person you see coming as an investor has access to public funds from China. Every one of them. All their conglomerates that come and sign agreements with you and they say to you their private sector is being supported, by their national sovereign wealth, funds, by their governments. But here in Nigeria, I hope we don't get to that point. You will get to a point where you struggle, do all the needed you need to do. If you know what's called an OBC, it's like pushing a camel through the eye of a needle. And then from that place you get to an FBC. From that place you get a fake approval. And then somebody turns around and says to you, do this or we're not going to move forward. This is an experience the both of us are sharing right now. And it is on something that is of a very broad and national, character. So it's important that when you're talking about this linkage, like you said, I should just take from where he goes. He mentioned, statistics from the MBS. Sometimes I also worry because what you get from the MBS is mostly administrative data. And what does that mean? You are not getting data that you're generating based on real time. Okay, administrative data is a mixture of assumptions, presumptions, scoping studies, okay, small studies, and all that. Now, and most of them even come from the agencies, okay, and they load it up to the MBS because MBS does not have the infrastructure to be able to do primary source data.
Okay.
So remember that I started by saying to you that the greatest challenge we have as a country is that when you say that Nigeria is 220 million persons, okay, they are just assumptions. But facts on the ground shows clearly that we are not that figure. We have not carried out a census that is reliable. In fact, all our census figures in the past 20, 30 years, nothing just they have been skewed because those figures are tied to how they share national income. If you want the truth to be told.
Yes.
So everybody who increases his numbers gets more because the revenue allocation is shared on three bases: land, population, and then pro rata or whatever it is that they used to do it. So point I'm trying to make, my brother, is that getting Nigeria right is very easy. Okay, it is for us to be able to tell ourselves those very hard truths. And what are the first hard truths? We need to know how many we are.
Okay.
That is first. We need to know what capacities each of our locations carry. That is second. We need to know what we need to do to turn our natural resources, okay, into goods that can be competitive in the international market. That is three. And for you to do that, you'll be needing two things. The first you'll be needing, okay, will be the right set of skills to transfer the skills. Go to our schools today. How many teachers that are teaching your children have basic qualification to teach? That you're a university graduate in chemistry does not mean you're trained to teach chemistry in a secondary school. Because for you to be able to teach chemistry, you need to go through the Department of Education where they teach you how to be able to teach chemistry. So when you have that at that level of education, this is actually where, at that foundation level, this is actually where you even begin to have issues. Are you listening to me? Secondly, today in Abuja, we are building a country. I don't know if those teachers have gone off strike. For you to, in a country, allow teachers to be on strike for a month is disastrous. It's enough for those children to lose interest in wanting to go back to school, especially to the ones who are in their teenage areas. So there's a lot we can talk about our country, Shegun, but I mean, like I said, we're a nation of work in progress, but truth be told, there are too many gaps that need to be filled up, really.
Thank you. Prof, like you said, there are too many gaps, and there are protests here and there, hues and cries. You mentioned the other time that probably the Tinubu administration met a very perilous economy, and they are taking tough decisions. And maybe if you had been Tinubu, you too, because of your background in economics, you would have taken such decisions.
No, of course.
Do you pity the administration, or is what we are getting now should be the expected outcome of some of those tough decisions? But because we've had comments like Tinubu is wicked, this government does not have human face, we've been hearing things like that said about the administration. Is it exaggerated reactions? Some people even say that many of those reactions are political. What do you think, Prof?
We're animals, and political animals have to react in different ways. The thing is this: if I look through the whole body of reforms that he has done, they are all necessary, and they all require the courage of him, or that of his kind of person, to be able to undertake them. The only weakness I would actually say is that initially when he started with those, the way it was being implemented was where the challenge was. It showed that they didn't think it through. But there were the right decisions to be taken. But you know, when you think something through, it comes back to what Dr. Emeka is saying. Where is the plan? You will walk through a plan. So it became trial and error initially. And that was why you saw the currency collapse to about 200% drop. And but eventually, they found the level. Because you know, initially, it says liberalize. Liberalize, there's no such thing as 100% liberalization. It doesn't happen anywhere in any country. You have managed float. You don't float currency when you cannot control supply and demand. You have shortage of supply of dollars because 90% is coming from crude. It's 81%, 89% comes, so 79% comes from crude, 11% comes from gas. It's only 10% that is within the purview of the CBN, which is your diaspora remittance, your this one, invincibles. But the bulk was coming from. So what that tells you that we need to diversify our export revenue. It needs to be diversified. Domestic diversification is good. We've got real diversity in our economy. You have ICT, banking sector, all the sectors, they're all pulling. But the foreign one is a problem. Even though that revenue from the oil and gas accounts for less than 50% of government revenue, but the fact that it controls 90% of forex means that there's turbulence. Supply and demand couldn't meet. So if you float, you're looking for trouble. So it has to be managed float. You have to manage it. So initially we tried to float, and then we were forced into massive devaluation. But then eventually we started correcting that position and then focused on eliminating the debt owed to airlines and all of that, because they were more. But anyway, in the end of the day, we have a handle now on monetary policy. And thank goodness too, our financial systems are stable. They passed all the stability tests. So that was helpful. If you had an unstable financial system, you might as well pack and go to the village. So we had that one, and it was moderating. But if you look at these other specific policies, say for example, look at many things that couldn't happen for years had to happen. Okay, it took us about 20 years to get PIA in. Buhari signed it, but just left the implementation for Tinubu to come on. So Tinubu came and waded into it. And you could see it. He implemented Naira to crude, is in the PIA. He gave a breather to the Dangote because they were being harassing him. He turned his searchlight to NNPC and scattered that board because they have a lot to answer to this country. So there's courage, and he's doing them. The fallout is something that we all have to expect, but over time we'll get to that. So if you look at other policies like tax reform, it will kick in January.
Yes.
But that tax reform is good for the country. Last week, I was running a workshop for revenue mobilization and fiscal commission, and I had to address the issue of fiscal policy for the country. And and I recognize that work was properly done, even though there are reservations from their side, because they are the one that had the mandate on revenue as allocation. But you could see what it took. But when it starts getting implemented by January, you will see change. The revenue may drop a little bit, but you're going to see change because it gave relief to the people who actually are on the bay. The citizens have something to say that they gained. They remove all the taxes on their health, education, and all that stuff. All the things that they consume, they try to remove all those taxes, which means their capacity to spend is going to increase. They're going to retain a lot more of whatever they get. It's a pittance, but they will retain a lot of it. And so when they start buying, what happens is that aggregate demand will increase in the economy. GDP increases. They went to the companies to remove tax threshold, increase it from 25 million to 50 million. You are allowing them to hold back some of their revenue. They can keep the jobs. They can employ more people. They can produce more. Aggregate output increases. GDP increases. Do you understand? And the third component is positive balance of payments. We were in red. Now we are over $6.8 billion in positive GDP increases. The final one is government expenditure. That's the 4 items that give you the GDP. Government expenditure is increasing, whether you like it or not. They're borrowing money anyway, so they're increasing. So whether it doesn't matter what the GDP figure is going to be showing you increase, but it doesn't quite explain why more people are going into poverty. Is it the contradiction?
Yes. I'm going to ask you that, but please, Dr. Emeka, please give me 1 more minute to stay with Prof. Prof, you've mentioned the issue of the tax law, the new tax law. One thing that everybody is shouting about now is the 5% petroleum tax. And they say this is another burden this administration is putting on us. But I've been reading so many things about it. Government saying that it is necessary. Government saying that, for now it's not going to be implemented until so period of time. But nobody has told us the advantage of that 5% tax.
Okay.
Is it not another burden just like?
No, every tax is a burden. But the fact is that some of them can be justified. Some may not be easy to justify. You see, if the current trajectory continues and all this nonsense going on with the unions, that, prices of petrol will continue to come down as long as we maintain Naira to crude policy. And then, touch wood, prices of crude continue to go as projected. The prices, it was 820 in the country. So the fact of the matter is that if the price is likely to continue to come down, that is relief. 5% of it is not, it doesn't kill a man. But let me explain to you, implementation of that new fiscal law will actually result in lower revenue for the government in the short run. But in the long term, it will energize the economy and create more businesses and health of business from which you can raise more tax revenue. So the question is that, don't forget that this 5% has been in the system for long. It's just that they are just trying to bring it now. That is the worst time to bring it. So I would say they should postpone that. But it's a necessary tax that government needs to collect. You know, it's like a phone call, electronic money transfer. It's very small. It's not 25 naira. Even when you send 1 million, you still get only 25 naira. But it comes out to become a lot of money. If you look at the total money, it comes to over hundreds of billions. Yeah, it's a necessary tax because it's evenly spread across every constituency. So if you can carry phone and make call, it matters well pay that 0.05%. Then if everybody is buying fuel and everybody is using it and that, it matters well pay something. So there are more equitable way of getting money for the government rather than to say increase the tax of those who are working. I mean, there are very few people that are working. You are overtaxing them. So what you do is that you try to spread the tax, bring more people into the tax net rather than increase the tax of people.
Okay. Dr. Emeka, one other thing that many people have said about this administration is that this government is living on borrowings. That if the government sees anybody that says I have 20 naira, government we want to collect 10 naira as to borrow from them. Is Nigeria borrowing too much? Are we now under the burden of debts, as people are saying?
Okay. First and foremost, I would ask a very rhetorical question. Why do we have financial institutions? Why do we have banks? What do banks do?
Okay. So this is rhetoric. I don't have to answer.
Okay. It is to lend. Okay. Borrowing is not bad. The borrowing that leads to sorrow is the one that is bad. Okay. When you borrow against a good cause, and this is why most of the times when you're submitting a business plan, they ask you to bring your cash flow projections. And in that cash flow projections, there's what they call your break-even point. All right, that break-even point is if you give me this money, between now, I'm going to be putting into here. And at this point in time, I am going to be breaking even. Okay? And at this time, I will not start paying you back. Okay? Now, that is called capital injection. But it is also borrowing. But when you're borrowing now, Shegun, you're hosting I Am Prof. And you feel that, okay, for us to show that this is an A-class station, you will take us to Hilton, lodge us there, and tell us to just relax and then come to this program. And you are not doing it against the money that you're bringing from adverts of the program. You're going to be borrowing to do that. That is the one that will bring sorrow to you. So first and foremost, remember that I kept insisting that it's important that we have a plan. And that plan you have will showcase clearly where you're putting in these funds, when you expect to get it back, how you expect to get it back, and who does what. Now, it is one thing for you to have companies to employ or come. It's another thing for them to have the human capital required to even set up shop. A lot of companies have said we cannot set up in Nigeria because the set of skills we need, to operate is not even existing here. Now, this is how it ties to your education system. And these days, you find that most other countries that are moving into what you call the real world now are based more on looking at producing those skills that can be able to help them get more operational than administrative. Am I making some sense to you? So the issue is when you talk about productivity, when you talk about production, when you talk about taxing people, okay, how many people, if you're bringing them into the tax net, if you look at what China did carry 100 million people and then said, okay, we'll put them inside the middle class. They started by now identifying small village, small family, small cottage, and they started aggregating them to start producing very little items. Crayons, pencils, biros, erasers, A, B, C, D. And then by the time you have 1 million people being trained on this activity and are producing, okay, you now have a bulk you can now begin to trade internationally by now ascertaining that they meet that international price. Okay, so there has to be a conscious effort to be able to first and foremost, hone up the human capital. The difference between human resources and human capital is that you can have men that have brawn, a six-pack, shoulders like barrels, and they are empty. All right? You can also have people in wheelchairs, okay, who are skilled, who will make mountains to move, who will press 1 or 2 buttons and bring down this house. When all your bronze and big men are here pushing and shouting Oshebe, 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 they're pushing a lorry off the road for 2 hours, that lorry hasn't moved. Another person comes in his wheelchair, climbs onto a train, starts it, and in 2 minutes, he's pulled the trailer out. Now, that's the difference between brawn and skill. Am I making some sense to you? So if we are going to be saying we want to pull people out of poverty and put them into productivity and production and then engage them into productive activities, you need to look at your curriculum. You need to look at your school system. Remember, I mentioned it. Okay? Now, what betide you if you have any matter with your car today? If you're wise, if you just have any knock in your engine, go and buy another engine. You take it to any mechanic, you will never drive that car anymore. Whereas in those days, you have people, when I'm talking about 020, I'm sure you met it, they said I've cut the car to 020, 030, 040, and it was still moving. Do you know what was happening then? We had technical centers that were certifying people technically. Okay? And then when they had that trade skill, either tradesman skill or whatever they call it in those days, that person will teach an engineer the practical aspect of things. Now, this is how a country develops. So, to answer your question directly, you can never borrow too much if you're able to have a cash flow, okay, that secures our borrowing. It's not about your GDP, what your GDP can carry. It is about what the project can be able to contain, and for me, your break-even point.
Okay. Let's go to infrastructure now. I know infrastructure is key to economic development. You keep hearing people like you talk about that. Now people now say that Wike is constructing roads, Wike is constructing bridges. So also there are very fine looking bridges. There is one in Kano that I love so much. It is very, very colorful. And the people say, is that what we are telling them? People are hungry, you are building roads, you are building bridges. You are embarking on highfalutin projects. People are hungry. What's the place of some of this infrastructure in this economic development that we are talking about? Is it a waste of money?
It's not. Nigeria's stock of infrastructure is 30%. In other words, stock of infrastructure, if you look over the last 10 years, whereas South Africa is 80%. 80.
Oh, 80.
So, people want to invest in your country when they believe you have infrastructure. Okay. And then let's analyze the infrastructure. You have rail lines.
Rail lines.
How many rail lines are working in Nigeria? You have highways. How many highways? Can you do 1,000 kilometer highway without that car being written off?
Nigeria.
Then you have inland waterways. Where is it? Is it the one that's sinking and all that? Then you have aviation. We are capable. Nigeria should have 2 aviation hubs, Abuja and Lagos, regional aviation hubs, but that's not happening. You have ICT connectivity. We are doing well, but we're under pressure now because you see how many times your calls can't complete. We have massive broadband expansion, but they need power. They need a little fuel and all that to maintain the base station, but they're falling down. Then you have other areas, even the small power that you have, which is ridiculous. Now let me give you the comparison. I've told you about the stock of infrastructure being 30% here, but 80 in South Africa. We are 230 million people. We are struggling with 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts of power. We are 4 times the population of South Africa. They have 58,000 megawatts of power. We have 6,000 megawatts of power. And we are 4 times their population. So the per capita power per person for South Africa is 40 times more than that of Nigeria. So if you're a foreign investor who wants to go and manufacture, why do you want to come to Nigeria? You go to South Africa where you don't worry about power. Now, here is the catch. You may want to come to Nigeria because we have the market. But now, listen to this. If a board in America or in London or somewhere has a project that they want to do this project in Nigeria, they want to build this factory, and that is going to cost 2 billion. They approved it because they know the market can take it, everything, the raw materials and everything. But when they now come back and say, wait a minute, we forgot to include $400 million required to make the road that enter the factory, to get water, to get that, they will start thinking again. And then before they will give you an answer, you come and say, you also need $200 million for security. But they will say, look, take it to South Africa, take it to India. That's the dilemma. Do you understand?
Yeah.
That's the problem. And then not even if it is in petrochemical related area or refinery, they will say, we hear that Govt is having problem, that his 10,000 trucks are not allowed to come out. And then you are telling us you want to buy trucks and to distribute. No, say no. So those are the things that are structural factors that discourage people from coming into your economy because you haven't got them. Number 2, when you have the infrastructure, now the problem is, it's not that we don't need it, we need it. But the second question is, why do you have to borrow to do it? The answer is that you have to, because you don't have it. It's very important for you to have them, for you to attract investment. And it's very important for you to have them so that you can support the market and you have a competitive market. You can produce competitively and then you can afford to compete out globally. The need is there. So government says that we want to borrow money because we haven't sufficiently attracted private sector. The last development plan that is ending this year says that what they want to borrow is 350 trillion naira. But government can only raise 50 trillion. So private sector, you come and bring 300 trillion. Does not tell you that they are looking at private sector to raise the money.
Yeah.
But when the private sector is not forthcoming, the government will still have to borrow. Now, there's nothing wrong with borrowing, as Emeka has said, but you have to borrow according to the rule. My challenge right now is that we are not so much keeping to those rules. And what are the rules? We have good thing that this administration has done is that they have revised the Act, Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Act 2025. Brilliant. They've done a Security and Exchange Commission Act. Brilliant. At least you can take care of the cryptocurrencies and all that.
Yes.
They've also done the NICON Insurance Act. The act that is crying out and wanting to be reviewed is the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, which has gone through first and second hearing, and that act hasn't got a teeth because you haven't got the offences and the amount of let me tell you what the problem is then. The problem is this: the act says yes, you can borrow money for activities such as infrastructure mentioned, but it says you have to borrow for a long term, which we understand to be 10 to 30 years or thereabout, and at concessionary rates, which we also understand to be like under 3% on that, and for a purpose of either capital expenditure or human resource development. And under capital expenditure, you have infrastructure or productive activity, productive capacity that is capable of repaying the money. Then it now comes and says, irrespective of what it is you want to borrow money for, we want to see cost-benefit analysis. Now that is where we have the biggest challenge. I've been asking for those, I haven't been seeing them. Now, why the cost-benefit analysis is this?
Important.
The law wants to have a discussion on any corridor about the economic corridor. See, you don't build infrastructure that leads to no man's land.
Yes.
The law expects you to have a discussion. We are going to build rail line, power line, road highway. Right. Okay. Which economic corridor is it going to go through? Industrial corridor, commercial corridor, residential corridor, so that there will be usage.
Okay.
And then you'll be able to raise money to maintain the infrastructure.
Okay.
If you call a PPP to come and maintain it for you, they will see the revenue. But if you go and build these ones that will go from one place to another, 1 kilometer, 100, 700, 900,
for political
purposes, you will not be able to repay the money.
Yes.
There will not be any revenue that will allow you to repay the money. You understand?
Yes.
And then the law also warned development finance institutions and said any lending outside this framework is unlawful. And we have a lot of lending outside the framework, especially those ones that involve constitutional cash transfer and all of that. Use your grant money to do those. Use your government internally generated revenue to share.
Yes.
Then don't go and borrow money for salaries or borrow money to repay money.
Prof.
Okay.
Don't go into that area. I reserve that for Dr. Emeka. Before I came on this program, I was in our editing room, and there was a program going on. It was even on our channel, but we were watching it on phone, and it was on this conditional cash transfer. We had a guest in the studio on that program lampooning governments about why do you hand over cash to people? Just go into the vault, bring out money and start sharing it to people. That doesn't bring people out of poverty. You are not teaching them to fish. You are just immersing them into greater poverty. And from my own layman, I didn't even know that I was going to be talking to experts like you. I said, man is probably an illiterate, because of my own little knowledge, there's a little wisdom in that. Please, I want you to help us address that issue. Government doling out money to the poorest of the poor in an economy as parlous as ours today. Is there any sense in it?
Is there any sense in, don't give me fish, but teach me how to fish?
Okay.
If there's any sense in, thank you for this offer, but I'll be happier if you teach me how to net, so I could not only eat for myself today, but also eat for tomorrow and next tomorrow. And then let's try to give a definition to this word, vulnerable and poor people.
Okay.
Is it the person that has no hands or legs? No. Is it the person that is blind? Is it the person that is infirmed? Or is it the person that lives in a local area? If it is, then the first local area people started living was Abuja. Yeah? Until infrastructure came. So for me, if you look at people that have done what we are doing, they didn't do it the way we did it. And I'm against it. I'm not for it. I'm not against people entering into social safety nets. I'm not against people being given coupons and tickets. I'm not against people being supported, to have a better life. But I'm against you putting money on the table and lining up people. First and foremost, you're degrading them. Secondly, you're removing that humanity in them. Thirdly, most of the places they come from are the most fertile parts of this country. Okay, all they needed for you to do was to be able to encourage them by first and foremost putting subsidies or being able to mop up whatever it was, that they were producing at that base price, so it can keep them into production. And then, like Prof says, give them that back-end infrastructure that can be able to secure what it is they're doing. And let me tell you this. Our cocoa farms, our groundnut farms, our palm plantations, our rubber plantations were where our city started growing from. Please fact check what I'm telling you. The warehouses that these goods were stored became the foundation of most of the cities that you know today. Why? Because in building those warehouses, they now built the infrastructure, first the dirt roads and then the railroads. And where were these dirt roads leading to? To farms. Where were the railroads leading to? To seaports and to this, first and foremost, to these warehouses. If you go to anywhere where you had pre-colonial and post-colonial warehouses, there is none. You won't see rail paths or rail lines passing directly in front of. Not one. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you have to talk about pro-poor and you want to take away a man's dignity, what do? Walk out of this studio and then get people to line up and you're giving them money. That is cruelty for me. Am I making some sense to you, Shegun? So if we are going to be getting it right, I don't think, yes, you can talk about the most vulnerable who are infirmed, who are sick, who will be needing medical attention, who you can be able to now say, okay, we're going to put you on free medicals, we're going to put you on free drugs, we're going to put you on dole. But not to look at a healthy young person who you can probably get a statistics and then encourage and engage. And this is why, again, I come back to, anytime I have this conversation, I say to people, this man you are calling poor, do you know him? I was consultant to the YESO program for Kogi State when, they were talking about these cash transfers way back in those days. And I saw people who were university graduates on that list. And I said, why would anybody who's graduated, from the universities conquer poverty? That is what a university degree gives to you. That's what tertiary education gives to you. You might not be rich, but you will never be poor. So we need to give a classification to poverty. Understand this very clearly. And for those of us who are in our 60s today, it didn't matter if your father was a professor and mine, was a hunter. He could pay both our school fees, just like your father paid yours. You know why? Because all of us were going to be sitting in the same classroom, in the same primary school, in the same secondary school. And trust me, Shegun, if your father was the VC of the university both of us attended and I made the first class and you made a third class, I will get a job in that university before you do. In fact, you won't even get a job. Okay? This was when we had what we call meritocracy. This was when we had the scholarship systems that encouraged our best, our brightest. In fact, in our days, anybody you saw who went abroad after WAEC, to go and study, 90% or most of the times there were people whose parents, they couldn't make WAEC here, they couldn't pass any of the universities here, they needed to just ship them abroad, so to be able to hide the family shame.
Yes.
Trust me. And if you failed your WAEC, you couldn't step out of your father's house.
Yes.
So it was when we had honor. And in those days, we also had people in the state of mind or state of economic being that you are now calling poor and vulnerable. And you go and line up and you start sharing the money. 8 million homes. You have spent 8 billion or 100 billion or whatever billion. Please think about it. Think about how many cottage industries that money would have been able to, establish in those communities. For those of them that are producing just melon seeds, imagine what an investment of 10 million or 20 million or 30 million will do to be able to encourage the farmers with seeds to be able to produce, and then, a cottage industry to either produce oils, processes and package it. So for me, you called him an illiterate. Please, if you know him, except you're going to be calling me an illiterate too, you owe him an apology, because I have no regrets in saying to you that thing is just not right. I'm not going to call it a fraud. It is well intentioned so that government can show, goodwill and good faith. But go and check, and I'm going to be resting on this. When they started the Niger Delta amnesty program and they started giving those young men what level 8 officers, were earning as stipend, I said to one of my friends who was a consultant, I said, I think you people are making a mistake by not engaging these young men. Because what you're giving them is what somebody has gone through university, struggled to get through an employment certificate, went through interviews, comes to work every morning to earn. You know what I think? I think this should have been an internship program. Get companies to be able to engage these young people so that they can see the value of earning money, be able to look forward to this money at the end of the month, and they sign a paper. It begins to do something to their psyche. But for now, what you're giving them is beer money. This is what people are using to put a wife and probably 2 or 3 children, family members, into some good living. Now, it turned out that I was right, and probably it didn't work out so well. So for me to answer it directly, my brother, conditional cash transfer, any kind of support you're giving to people who are vulnerable and you don't know their history, and you don't have any plan for you to move them from that period you're making them to depend on stipend or be on that begging stage to a point where you say, in 4 months' time, okay, Emeka, you have 3 kids who are not in school, who need to go back to school and graduate. We're going to be giving them scholarships to be able to do ABCD. We're going to be supporting your wife with ABCD. Sometime in Kano, they started sharing women iwis, small ships, okay, to start keeping. And in less than no time, those women during Salah had something to sell. And they started getting empowered. So you don't dash money. I don't believe. I'm not saying you cannot give people money. I give. Okay? But I don't give and give and give again. Okay? I can give you now because you tell me you're hungry. And next time you come, I say, okay, if I know what, hop into the car and let's go to the farm.
I'm hungry.
Let's go to the farm.
On that particular note, okay. I think I was trying to explain that I'm not patently opposed to conditional cash transfer. What I was saying is it has to be limited to a specially defined group, like you said, the weakest, the most disadvantaged in terms of physical disability, or the kind of disability or illness that their life is on the line. But my major one is that it should not borrow the money that you are going to distribute.
You emphasize that.
You use government internally generated revenue. Should the government don't raise 36 billion, trillion? Go use it to go and share it. Then go outside to World Bank. The World Bank wants to give you, let them give you their grant. You don't have to, you distribute that. They don't borrow money that you have to repay back. And then you say you are going to distribute. It's against that law.
Okay.
It's against the fiscal law.
Yes, I even like.
And then let me tell you how else you can use money. We have 42 million MSMEs, which are 48% of the MSMEs in Africa. We have 90 million MSMEs in Africa. So while our population is 18%, our GDP is 15%, our entrepreneurship is 48%. So it's a latent comparative advantage. And what I say is, if you have 42 million MSMEs, why don't you say to them, what does it take for me to make you train one person and create one job for one person? Do you understand?
Yes.
These 42 million people can create 42 million jobs if you give them what they need to train the people, all these young people. And what would it do? It might be 6 months training that you pay for, or you can even subsidize, pay half, and they pay half. That's how we do it in UK. You just train. The training that needs to be is done in the workplace, not in the school alone. And don't forget that we are told to build hundreds of thousands of schools, and we are not told to build skills. Germany, go to Germany. It's about craftsmanship, it's about technical education, it's about so that everybody, if you have 200 components that go to a car, somebody makes one makes one, then one big company assembles them. That's the way to go. Okay. Use these companies to create those jobs, and those people become, you multiply the companies by 2.
Very closely,
84 million.
related to that. This conversation that I said we had in the editing room just before I came here. There's a young man there, his name is Victor. He was the one leading the argument. And I said, you're a graduate. You know? And you are among those crying, Ebin Pami. Tinubu Administration. I said, that certificate that you have, that graduate, just like you said, it makes you out of poverty already. But a number of youths these days are disillusioned, not because of the bad education that they had, but the fact that they are educated should be enough to fire something in them, the creative energy in them. How do we motivate the Nigerian youth to begin to see the potential that he has? You're already a graduate. Why sit down folding your arms and bemoaning your fate? How do we motivate them, Prof?
They're not giving them the right skill that they need, that the employers want. There's a mismatch between the skills that employers want to come and help their business and for you to set up your own business. A mismatch between those skill sets and what is coming out of education. That's what I was saying to you. I said the colonists told us to build millions of schools. They didn't tell us to build skills. Because that means that, okay, I train a lot of people in the university, I give them scholarship, and I insist that you should develop 2 skills, 2 vocational skills while you are still doing your university, because that is what you are going to rely on. You have to do hairdressing or balloon artistry or cake something or fashion or whatever, little thing that will give them something, and I pay for those in addition to their scholarship. So that they are more dependent on themselves. And you find out, when they even graduate, some of them will just kick off with that, with those skills. The emphasis is work-related skills that builds the people and tell them how to make business. The young boy comes out of university, he's only been reading it in textbook, and then you're telling him to go and jump into fire, go to the village and farm land. You have to give him the skill that he needs. And those skills are acquired, practical skills acquired in the workplace. Okay. Somebody needs to shadow you, somebody needs to show you through it.
Doctor, this your final word on this program. He's dropped before this program. You and Prof, you were talking about agriculture. We're talking of buying this, buying that, so that you can plant more. Is there faith in agriculture for this country, especially even for our young Nigerians?
There's something I and Prof are doing together. In my own case, now anywhere I go to, I say, please, first and foremost, put farmer before you put any other thing. In my center, or in our center in Abuja, I have livestock. When my last son was 8, what I do every Saturday is that I take him there and they give him a stick and he starts grazing the cattle. I will show you here. In my house where I live, I have yams. I've always grown yams in bags. And some months ago, Prof calls me and says, I just ordered sweet potatoes. Somebody is going to call you to give you some so that we can put them in our center in Abuja. From filling those bags to planting the bags, it was done by me and my children. Okay? So that anytime we have any opportunity, we drive to the farm and they try to remove the grasses. And I say to them, what excitement do you feel? What do they do? One runs onto me and says, oh, my potato is grown. Oh, my corn is sprouting. Oh, my this. I said, that was exactly the same feeling that I had growing up. Because part of our education in those days was that every child had a small portion. It taught us empathy. But today you have a lot of parents saying, what I saw my children will never see. I walked 10 kilometers to go and fetch water. My children will never see it.
They're spoiling them.
Okay, my children will never see it. My children wake up before the people who live in my house. I don't have house helps. And they do exactly the same thing they're doing. My wife is not around now, and there's nothing that is missing. Apart from that, I'm not having her companion. The house runs. I leave the house very early. By the time I wake up, my breakfast is there. So it is all about you, the father. What you think your children, should do. Everybody wants their kids to be aeronautical engineers. But nothing stops that boy who's an aeronautical engineer to plant some little bit peppers around. Professor is a professor from military to name it. I mean, if you went and Googled his CV. But he also hasn't told you that he has thousands and hectares of land that he's planting, that he visits. This is the key. It is us, the parents. It is us who say, God forbid that my child is going to end up a farmer. God forbid that God takes away your flair for food. Because right now, it's unfortunate, but it is true, the people feeding us in Abuja, okay, are the so-called, locals who will carry the basket of yam. And because the population is getting larger, the farms are getting, smaller. Then by the time they bring out a tuber of yam and say to you, it is 5,000, you start shouting. And you're not able to afford it. If you can't afford it, why can't you plant it, Shegun? So I think the problem is our psyche. And it is the psyche of our so-called, and please note the word, okay, so-called bourgeoisie, so-called middle class, so-called big men, okay, that now believe that their children have outgrown, their environments and their culture. The day and manner you outgrow being able to do dobale. If your father had a cocoa farm, Shegun, you go home, you outgrow going to the cocoa farm to go and help on that cocoa farm, your life is finished.
Thank you.
This is what is finishing us in Nigeria.
Thank you. Prof, your final word on this program, with all that we've been talking about. Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I think so. I'm much more confident of the economic future of our country. Because for once, you can actually see a direction. Both the fiscal authorities are following that direction and the monetary authorities are following that direction. I can see reforms, lots and lots of reforms. But I can also see pain in the eyes of people. I can see that it won't be too long before we come to terms with them.
On that very cheery note, there will be pains, but it won't last for too long. I want to say thank you very much for standing with us on this program for today. I must thank Dr. Emeka for your deep knowledge of the issues that we've discussed today and the clarity of your expression.
When you have the master, what are you doing with this boy?
Don't listen to him.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much. I must thank you, Professor Kenifi.
Thank you.
Anytime that I have you on my show, I always enjoy your deep knowledge and your very vast experience on economic issues. Thank you very much for coming on the program. Well, this is where we call it a date on the program Polity for Monday. The program returns tomorrow at 2 p.m. But join me at 8 p.m. for Matters Arising. Good afternoon.